I woke up, blood all over my shirt. I looked beside me. There was a massive tree trunk. The van that I was in on the passenger side had completely wrapped around the tree.
Can you break down storytelling for me? And what does a story do?
The purpose of a story, other than the 4 C's of character, context, conflict, and creation, is to create belief. People love stories because they make them feel a certain way, and we know that feeling, right, leads to function. The focus, I think Myron Golden says this very well. He says, the focus in your head creates the feeling in your heart that creates the function in your hand, right? Stories create feeling. And when you use them to frame ideas, to paint the picture of what you want somebody to think or believe, then the story becomes powerful and you're able to sell with it. So let me just back up a little bit. So the core of it, stories are about the creation of belief, right? A story, a functional story, a sellable story is a story that creates belief, like 5 things, right? Create belief in the cause, the person, the problem, the process, the opportunity, the outcome, and the offer. I have a cool little acronym for it, C3PO. You know the Star Wars guy, the robot from Star Wars?
Yeah.
So the robot from Star Wars, C3PO, right? What are robots? They're programmable. If you want to tell stories that program the subconscious mind, kind of like you're programming a robot to get people to do, like I said, what you want them to do, feel like they're doing it for their reasons, right? The story has to make them believe in the cause, believe in the person, believe in the problem, believe in the process, the opportunity, the outcome, and the offer. And by default, if they believe in the 5, they will believe in the offer. Right? So that's the 6th one, but the 5 are really important. Okay. So a story has to do that. And you do that with the 4 C's of effective storytelling: character, context, conflict, and creation. There are, like I said, 12 different types of stories. Each story has a corresponding emotional activator or buying trigger. And we're talking about status, validation, authority, trust, security, all the emotional activators that are required in making a sell. And it's not always about selling, because when you tell the story properly, you are framing and reframing beliefs. You are overcoming objections. You are selling without selling because you are seeding, right? You're seeding the subconscious mind. To your point, earlier about the origin story stories are powerful because they release certain brain chemicals, right? A good origin story should release oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and cortisol. So cortisol is the attention chemical. And it's very important because I leverage, the release of cortisol in the beginning of my origin story. So most people in the beginning of their origin story, they start from where? The beginning of the story.
Yeah.
So they start telling their backstory first. And the reason why I don't do that is because you ever watch a Netflix show or you watch a series, on Amazon or wherever, and the first 2 episodes are all about setting up the character, and they're just so boring that a lot of people tune out of shows in the first episode because they don't get into the action, right? So a lot of times when I watch a series, I'll skip forward, right? I'll skip to episode 2 or episode 3 just to start getting into the storyline and not the setup, right? So a lot of people will tell their backstory. Here's the thing about that. If they don't know who you are, and if they don't know that you are valuable yet, they will not care about your backstory. I didn't say they wouldn't care about the origin story, because they do. They care about the outcome of it, right? But they won't care about the setup, the backstory, the past, if they don't know that what you're doing in the present is worth it, right? How do I keep their attention, or how do I spark their attention in the beginning of an origin story? My format is this. I start my origin story at my lowest point. Here's what I mean. You ever watch a TikTok reel or an Instagram reel where they cut the craziest, most interesting part, and they put it on the very beginning, the first few seconds. So you see something crazy, and then it cuts back to the beginning?
Yep.
Right? That's how I want everybody to start their origin stories. So I tell them, I said, start from you at your lowest point. I'll give you an example. If a part of my story is a car accident, and I got into a car accident, I would start my story by saying, I woke up, blood all over my shirt. I looked beside me. There was a massive tree trunk. The van that I was in on the passenger side had completely wrapped around the tree, right? If I start the story like that, everybody now says, well, wait a minute, what happened? Now they're asking for the backstory, right? So I basically get permission to tell them the backstory leading up to the horrible event by introducing them first to the horrible event.
100%.
So you introduce them first to the horrible moment, and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Okay, now you back up and you say, well, let me tell you what happened. Boom. Okay, now you have a dopamine build leading up to, because dopamine is not really about excitement. People think it's excitement. It's not. It's about the anticipation of an event, right? So dopamine is anticipation, right? You're building tension and anticipation leading up to the horrible moment. Then you have this pitfall, this failure, this horrible moment, this thing that happens in your life, okay? It's very important in the origin story that you don't just jump from failure to I figured it out, because that's where a lot of people make mistakes. And that's not reality. That's not real life. You don't just jump from, oh, I had a horrible moment and then I figured it out and boom, now I've got awards, now I've got success, now I've got money, because real life doesn't happen like that. What happens? When you're in your horrible moment, you dip into a very vulnerable emotional state. You talk about the pain, the problems, the feeling, how you felt in that moment, okay? What this does is it releases a brain chemical called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the trust chemical or bonding chemical, right? When you start to talk about that, and it's very important too, in the origin story, okay? People love to talk about themselves, but when you learn to talk about yourselves and everything you say is so relatable to the person listening, right? Then they become so entwined with who you are, right? And they say, this person aligns with me. They basically, like other people say, they put themselves in your shoes, and the outcome that you got from the story is the outcome that they now feel like they can get, because everything you said is so relatable to who they are that them rejecting your outcome or offer is them rejecting themselves.
Wow.
Right. And I'll talk about how to do that in a second. But basically, once you dip down and you talk about the pain and the feeling of how you felt in your lowest moment, then the light bulb goes off, you have the epiphany, and you realize you have to make a change. Now, it's very important in your story that you don't skip ahead there, because some people say, oh, I realized I had to make a change and I found the framework and I got it.
Yeah.
You can't do that either, because life doesn't happen like that. That's not how scaling works. Growth is not comfortable. Things happen. So after you have the epiphany, light bulb goes off, you realize you had to make a change. Now you go into a portion of the story that I call tried this, tried that. You tried this, tried that, worked a little bit. You still had obstacles, problems, and things that happened along the way, because disruption always follows intention. But here's why that's important, okay? People also have tried different things, different methods. They're learning from other people. If you're coaching or you're teaching anything, any type of framework, the people who are buying from you or will buy from you or are learning from you have most likely learned other frameworks from other people, because course people buy courses.
Yeah.
And if they buy a course from you, they've bought courses from other people. Not saying that they always take action on the courses that they buy, but course people buy courses, right? So you want to pay attention to other methods and other frameworks. And it's not about throwing rocks at your competitors. I know some people talk about that. And it's not even about calling out those methods directly. But correct me if I'm wrong, if you have learned another method from another person, and I start to talk about an element or a piece of that method, you'll identify it right away. You'd be like, 100%. I learned that. I know where that's from. Okay.
Now, that happens a lot too, because I'm around a bunch of people that have learned from Russell Brunson, and when they're trying to kind of talk about any of this stuff, that jump at me all, immediately from, because I know all the stuff that.
And so here's the secret to it. Okay. In the tried this, tried that portion of the origin story, you want to outline or identify as many other methods and frameworks that are taught by your competitors as possible, and start to plug in those things. And here's how you do it in your story. You say, I tried this. I got a little bit of it was a good stepping stone. Like, I'll subtly throw rocks. I won't say it's horrible. I'll say it was a good stepping stone or good starting point for me, right? I tried this, I tried that. Again, I'm tossing out other methods and frameworks. And here's the principal reason why that matters, because people buy at the crossroads of familiarity and surprise, right? If it's too familiar to them, they think they already know it. They feel like they don't need it. If it's too surprising to them, they're afraid of it and they don't want it, right? So you have to identify with what's familiar to them before you introduce your new thing. Right. So by you jotting down all the other methods and frameworks that other people follow, and you say in your story, I tried this, tried that, it was a good stepping stone, it led me to this discovery, okay, still had these obstacles. So now what you're doing is basically anchoring the obstacles and the problems to what other people are teaching that naturally presents your method or your new thing as the better choice, the obvious better choice. So you're doing that in the tried this, tried that portion of the, of the story. So, like I said, it's very important to pay attention. I sit and I absorb YouTube content on all of my competitors in the space. And guys, by the way, at this point in my life, I don't consider any of them competitors. They're more like collaborators now.
Yeah.
Because we're working together, we're JV and we're doing podcasts. We're sharing audience, because if you've got something valuable to give and I have something valuable to give, why not cross promote and why not give that value, right?
Yeah.
I don't see anybody in the beginning. It was all about competition, because that is a motivator. You've got positive gain, fear of loss, competition, and those are, big motivators, but I'm not motivated by any of those things anymore. The fourth level of motivation is impact, and I'm now motivated by impact. So I do share a lot with other people's audiences now.
Yeah.
But you have the tried this, tried that portion. Coming out of that, through all of those things that you tried and still had problems with, you found the solution, and you've now created a framework for them. And the transition to the offer is, listen, guys, I've told you where I came from. You relate to who I am as a person. You've seen what I tried to do. Most of you have tried to do similar things like me and had similar results. I want to show you what actually worked for me. And I've decided to make it simple for you, simple framework, whether it be 3 secrets or pillars or, keys, whatever you want to call them, right? That's your transition into the framework from the origin story. So again, in overview, you start with you at your lowest point. You back up, tell the story from the beginning, okay? Then you have your failure moment. You have your epiphany, the realization of change. Then you have the obstacles where you tried to change and still had problems with it, right? And then you discovered the solution, and now you're going to teach that solution. So a good origin story always leads to the outcome of some new method or unique mechanism of being able to accomplish the thing that you're telling people you've accomplished, coming from where you were to where you are.